A strange arrival. It was a quiet night in the mountains, the kind of night where the wind whispered through the trees, and the only sound was the crackling of a small fire. Ethan sat by the fire in his cabin, trying to relax after a long day of hiking. The only light came from the flames flickering in the hearth, casting shadows on the wooden walls of the cabin. Ethan had always loved the peace of the mountains. His cabin was in a secluded area, far away from the busy city life he had left behind. Here, in the silence, he found comfort. But tonight, something felt different. As the fire crackled, Ethan felt a strange sensation in the air, an unease. He couldn't explain. Suddenly, he heard a noise. At first, it was barely a whisper, just a rustling sound from the corner of the room. Ethan froze. He had been living alone for weeks and knew there was no one else around for miles. His heart raced as the noise grew louder. It wasn't the wind or an animal, it was something else. With slow, careful steps, Ethan stood up from his chair. He glanced toward the corner of the room where the sound had come from. It was dark, and he could barely make out anything beyond the faint glow of the fire. But then a shape moved in the shadows. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Was it a person, an animal, or something else entirely? He grabbed a nearby flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. As he stepped closer, the shape in the corner became clearer. What he saw made his blood run cold. There, crouching by the wall, was a woman, but not like any woman he had ever seen before. Her skin was a soft shade of blue, glowing faintly. In the low light, she had long silver blonde hair that shimmered as it cascaded down her back. She wore strange clothing, something that looked like leather but with designs that Ethan couldn't recognize. Her eyes were wide with fear, and she trembled as she stared at him. Ethan took a step back, confused and shocked. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice shaky but firm. The woman flinched at his voice, pulling her knees closer to her chest as if trying to protect herself. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Instead, she pointed at him, her fingers shaking. Her eyes were full of panic, and her breathing grew faster. Ethan could see that she was terrified of him. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly, trying to calm her down. "I just want to help." The woman's eyes widened even more, and she shook her head frantically. She backed up against the wall, as if she was trying to get as far away from him as possible. Her fear was so clear that Ethan felt his own heart tighten with sympathy. Ethan knew he had to be careful. He couldn't just approach her like he would any other person. She was different, strange, but he couldn't understand why she was so scared of him. He slowly lowered the flashlight, trying to show her that he meant no harm. He took a few more steps back to give her some space. After a long pause, the woman spoke, but her words were not in any language Ethan recognized. They were soft, almost like whispers, and the strange sound sent a chill down his spine. She repeated the words, her voice trembling. Ethan had no idea what she was saying, but he could tell from the tone of her voice that she was asking for help. But from what? Why was she here, in his cabin, hiding from him? "Look," Ethan said, crouching down a little to seem less threatening. "I don't know what's going on, but I'm not going to hurt you, I promise. You're safe here." The woman seemed to calm down a little, though she didn't move much. Her body was still tense, and her eyes kept flicking to the door, as if she expected someone or something to come after her at any moment. Ethan couldn't help but wonder what kind of trouble she was in. Where did she come from? And why was she so afraid? As the silence grew between them, Ethan realized that he couldn't just leave her like this. He needed to figure out what was happening, He needed to know who she was and why she was here, hiding in his cabin in the middle of nowhere. But as the minutes passed, he had no answers, only more questions. Ethan glanced at the door. The wind outside had picked up, howling through the trees. It sounded almost like it was calling to him. The world outside felt so distant and unfamiliar, but inside the cabin, everything seemed strange now too. Was this woman truly alone, or was someone else out there looking for her? Before he could ask her another question, the woman suddenly looked at him with an intensity that made him freeze. She whispered something again, her voice urgent this time. Whatever it was, it didn't sound like a plea for help, sounded like a warning. Ethan didn't understand what she meant, but one thing was clear. He was about to find out more than he ever expected. Understanding, the Furathan sat down on the floor, a few feet away from the mysterious woman, trying his best to make himself appear non-threatening. He watched her closely, noting the way her eyes darted nervously toward the window, as if she expected someone or something to appear at any moment. The room was eerily quiet now, the only sound being the crackling of the fire. But even that felt distant, as if it belonged to another world entirely. The woman was still trembling, her body tense, her skin a soft blue that seemed to shimmer. In the firelight had a strange, otherworldly glow to it. Her eyes, though wide with fear, were beautiful, unlike anything Ethan had ever seen before. They were a deep, glowing violet, and as she looked at him, it was as if she could see straight through him. It made him feel exposed, like she knew something about him that he didn't. What are you?" Ethan asked quietly, the question escaping before he could stop it. He felt foolish immediately after asking. Of course, she wasn't from Earth, but what did that mean? Where was she from? Why was she here? She flinched at his words, as though they caused her physical pain. Her lips parted, and she looked at him desperately, as if trying to communicate, but unable to find the right words. She began to speak again, but this time, her voice was softer, more broken. It almost sounded like she was pleading, asking for help. Ethan leaned forward, trying to catch her words. Though he couldn't understand them, the tone of her voice, desperate, filled with fear, was enough to make him realize how much danger she was in. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, hoping to use a translator app, but the woman's eyes widened in alarm when she saw it. "No," she whispered, almost a hiss. "No phones." She spoke in broken English, and her voice was filled with panic. Ethan froze. He had no idea why a simple phone would scare her so much, but the look in her eyes made him put it away immediately. There was something wrong, something very wrong about this whole situation. He wanted to help her, but he couldn't do that if he didn't understand her fear. The woman's gaze shifted from the phone to the door. She was watching it intently, her eyes flicking back and forth, as though she expected someone to come barging through it at any moment. Her breathing quickened. Ethan could see the fear rise within her, and it made his heart race as well. "It's all right," Ethan said gently, his voice calm. "I'm not going to hurt you. You're safe here. Nobody's going to hurt you, I promise." She shook her head violently, her long silver hair flying round her face. She was starting to shake more intensely now, her body trembling like a leaf in the wind. The terror in her eyes was unmistakable, and it only grew stronger with every passing second. Ethan realized that this woman wasn't afraid of him, she was afraid of something else. Something far worse. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice shaking. "They won't stop until they find me." The words sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Who was she talking about? Who could possibly be after her? The woman's fear was so raw, so real, that Ethan couldn't ignore it. It was clear she was running from something powerful, something relentless. But what could it be? Who are they? Ethan asked, trying to get her to explain, to offer some kind of clue. Who's chasing you? She looked at him, her face full of pain, as if she didn't want to say it out loud. Then, in a voice so soft that Ethan could barely hear it, she said, "The hunters." Ethan frowned. "The hunters." She nodded slowly. "They come for us. All of us. We are not safe. Anywhere we cannot run." Ethan was confused, unsure of what she meant. Who are we, and who are these hunters? But the woman's eyes darted to the door again. She was no longer looking at him, her attention fixed on something far away. Ethan could feel the tension in the room grow. It was as though the air itself had changed, thickening with a sense of dread. Whatever was coming, it wasn't good. Suddenly, a loud sound from outside made them both jump. It was a low rumble, like the earth itself was groaning under the weight of something heavy. Ethan stood up quickly, his heart racing. He looked out the window, but the darkness outside revealed nothing. The trees stood still, untouched by the wind, yet the noise persisted, and it seemed to be getting closer. "They're here," the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They found me." Ethan's mind raced as he looked around. His cabin was small and isolated there, was nowhere to hide. He couldn't protect her if whatever was out there was as dangerous as she seemed to think. "What do we do?" Ethan asked, his voice shaking. The woman didn't answer at first. Instead, she stood up slowly, her body still tense with fear. She moved toward the back of the cabin, her steps quiet but purposeful. Ethan followed her instinctively, not knowing what else to do. She turned to him, her eyes filled with a strange kind of resolve. "You must help me," she said, her voice firm now. "You must protect me, please." Ethan nodded, even though he didn't fully understand what he was getting himself into. But one thing was clear, he wasn't just dealing with a frightened woman. He was about to face something far more terrifying than he could imagine. The truth revealed. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he followed the alien woman to the back of the cabin. The strange noise outside was growing louder, and the air was thick with tension. She moved with purpose, her blue skin glowing faintly. In the low light, every step she took seemed deliberate, but her fear was palpable. Ethan had so many questions. He couldn't understand who or what was after her. He had never imagined his quiet life in the mountains would be interrupted like this. And yet, here he was, standing at the edge of something far beyond his comprehension. The woman stopped near the back window and peered outside cautiously. Her sharp eyes scanned the dark forest, flicking from shadow to shadow. Ethan could see her shoulders tense. She was waiting for something, and whatever it wasn't good. "Who are the hunters?" Ethan asked again, his voice low, though he was almost afraid to hear the answer. The woman didn't immediately respond. She just stared out into the night, her mind clearly elsewhere. After what felt like an eternity, she spoke. "They are not human," she said, her voice strained. "They are creatures from my world, but they look like humans. They hunt down my kind, anyone they think is a threat." Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. "What do they want with you?" She hesitated for a moment before answering. "I ran away. I was a part of something I didn't want to be a part of. I defected." Ethan's confusion only deepened. "A part of what?" "I was part of their military," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "But I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't hurt people. I couldn't live with the things they made me do. So I ran." I left everything behind. But they don't let anyone leave. They come after anyone who tries to escape. Ethan's mind raced. He tried to imagine what kind of military force she was talking about, but the thought was too surreal to process. She wasn't human. She wasn't from Earth. And yet, she was here, hiding in his cabin. Why did they want you? What did you do? Ethan asked, his voice softer now. Her eyes flickered with a mix of pain and regret. I wasn't the only one. There are many others who try to escape, but the hunters, they don't stop. They don't let anyone get away. Ethan could see that she was struggling with the weight of her past. He had seen that look before on soldiers, on people who had been through things they couldn't easily forget. But the stakes were much higher here. She wasn't just running from something in her past. She was running for her life. But why come here? Ethan asked. Why to my cabin? How did you even find it? The woman paused, her eyes narrowing as she looked out the window once again. I didn't choose this place, she said slowly. It's where I ended up after being chased. I didn't know who lived here, but I was desperate. I didn't want to lead them to anyone else. I thought I could hide here, but I should have known. No one can escape them. Ethan's mind was spinning. He wasn't sure whether to believe her or not. But there was something about the way she spoke about, the way she carried herself, that made him think she wasn't lying. She wasn't human, but she seemed to be just as real as anyone he'd ever known. Is there any way we can stop them? Ethan asked, his voice filled with desperation. Can we fight back? The woman's face hardened. No, she said quietly. They're too powerful. They have technology far beyond what you could imagine. I was trained to fight, but I couldn't win. They always find you. Ethan felt a cold chill run through him. What was he supposed to do now? She was right, he had no weapons, no way to fight whatever was coming for them. All he had was his cabin in the middle of nowhere, and that felt less like safety with every passing second. I'm sorry, she said softly, her eyes downcast. I didn't want to drag you into this. You didn't deserve any of this. I just didn't know where else to go. Ethan stared at her, trying to process everything she had told him. His mind was still racing, trying to make sense of it all. But one thing was clear, she wasn't the enemy. She was a victim, just like he was. She had been running for her life, and she had come to him for help. I don't care about what happened to you before, Ethan said, his voice steady. All that matters is what happens next. And right now, we need to figure out how to survive this. She looked up at him, her violet eyes wide with surprise. You're willing to help me? Ethan nodded. Of course. You're not alone in this anymore. The woman stared at him for a long moment, as though searching for something in his face. She seemed to find it, because slowly she nodded, her shoulders relaxing just a little. I don't know how much longer we have, she said quietly, her voice full of fear once again. They'll come for me. They won't stop until they find me. Ethan looked out the window, his heart racing as he thought about the danger they were both in. He didn't know what to do, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going to let her face this alone. The chase begins. The silence in the cabin was deafening. Ethan and the alien woman stood by the window, staring into the dark forest that surrounded them. The wind had picked up again, rustling the branches outside, but it wasn't the wind that had them on edge. It was the creeping feeling of danger, the sense that someone was watching them. They're here, the woman whispered, her voice tense with fear. Ethan turned toward her, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never seen her so shaken. She was usually calm, even in the face of danger, but now she looked like she was on the brink of losing control. He stepped closer to her, instinctively trying to reassure her, but he wasn't sure how. He didn't know how to handle this situation. He was just a man in a mountain cabin, facing an enemy he couldn't understand. "Are you sure?" Ethan asked, his voice low. She nodded, her eyes wide. "I can feel them. They've been tracking me. They know where I am." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. The realization hit him like a wave. Whatever was coming, it wasn't something he could handle alone. He had no weapons, no training, and no idea how to fight whatever these hunters were. All he had was his cabin, and he was quickly realizing that it wouldn't be enough to keep them safe. "We need to move," she said suddenly, her voice urgent. Ethan blinked, taken aback. "What? Move where?" "There's a cave not far from here," she explained quickly. "It's hidden and it's deep. They won't find us there." Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed his jacket and slung it over his shoulders. "Let's go, then." The woman nodded, her expression still filled with fear but also determination. Without another word, she moved toward the door, and Ethan followed close behind. They stepped outside, the cold night air biting at their skin. The forest around them was dark, with only the faint glow of the stars above guiding their way. Ethan could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on him as they made their way through the trees. The woman led the way, her movements graceful and swift, almost like she was part of the night itself. Ethan struggled to keep up, his breath coming faster as the path grew steeper. The forest was silent, save for the crunch of their footsteps on the dry leaves. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. His heart raced as they moved deeper into the woods, and every crack of a twig or rustle of leaves sent him into a state of alertness. Was it just his imagination, or were they being followed? "We need to hurry," the woman said, her voice tight with urgency. "They'll be here soon." Ethan nodded, quickening his pace. He didn't need any more reminders. The fear in her eyes had been enough to convince him that they were in real danger. But just as he picked up his speed, he heard something, a low growl barely audible above the sound of the wind. He froze, his breath caught in his throat. The woman stopped in her tracks, her body going rigid. Her eyes darted around, scanning the dark forest. "They're close," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We need to move faster." Ethan's pulse quickened. They weren't alone. The growl sounded again, louder this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching on the forest floor. Someone or something was closing in on them. Without warning, the woman grabbed his arm and yanked him forward. "This way," she urged, pulling him toward a narrow path hidden among the trees. Ethan didn't question her. He just followed, his legs burning with effort as they ran. The sounds of pursuit grew louder, closer. Whatever was after them was gaining ground. Ethan's mind raced. What kind of creatures were these hunters? What did they look like? How could they move so silently through the woods? They reached the cave just as the first of the figures emerged from the shadows. The woman pushed Ethan inside, quickly following him in. They huddled against the cold stone walls, their breathing heavy and uneven. Outside, the sounds of footsteps grew louder, and Ethan's heart thudded in his chest. The cave was their only refuge, but how long could it protect them? The woman glanced at Ethan, her face pale but determined. "We can't stay here long," she whispered. "They'll search the area, but if we stay quiet, if we stay still, they might pass us by." Ethan nodded, barely able to keep his breath steady. They crouched in the dark, the sound of their own hearts pounding in their ears. The woman's eyes darted toward the entrance, and Ethan followed her gaze. He could hear the hunters now, their voices low and urgent, as if they were communicating with each other. They were close. "We need to make a plan," Ethan said quietly. "I can't just sit here and wait for them to find us." The woman looked at him, her eyes serious. "We have no choice. If we try to fight them, we'll lose. We can't take them on head to head." Ethan clenched his fists, frustration and fear bubbling inside him. He hated feeling helpless. But the woman was right. There was no way they could win this battle, not in the open. "We wait," she said softly. "We wait until they pass, and then we move again. But we need to be smart. We need to stay out of sight." Ethan swallowed hard, trying to calm his nerves. He didn't know how long they would have to wait, but he knew one thing for certain: the chase had only just begun. Bonds of trust. The hours dragged by in the cave. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig outside made Ethan's heart race. His muscles were tense from crouching in the darkness, every nerve on edge. But as the hours passed, the sounds of the hunters outside began to fade. Eventually, the voices grew quieter, the footsteps slower, until all that could be heard was the occasional breeze rustling the branches above. Ethan could barely see the woman in the dark, but he could feel her presence beside him, still tense, still alert. They hadn't spoken in what felt like hours, both of them too focused on the sounds outside to risk making any noise. But finally, the silence became too much for Ethan to bear. He had so many questions he needed answers to if he was going to help her. And for the first time since she had appeared in his cabin, he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep quiet. "Are they gone?" Ethan whispered, his voice barely above a breath. The woman didn't answer immediately. She was still listening, her sharp eyes scanning the entrance of the cave, her ears twitching at the slightest noise. But after a long pause, she nodded. "They're gone," she said quietly, though her voice still trembled with unease. "For now." Ethan exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He allowed himself to relax just a little, though he knew better than to think they were out of danger. They weren't safe yet. But for now, the immediate threat had passed. He shifted, trying to get comfortable on the hard ground, but his mind kept racing. "I don't understand," he said, his voice strained. "Who are these hunters, and why are they after you?" The woman was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant, as though she was considering whether or not to answer him. Finally, she spoke. "They are called the Huun," she said, her voice low. "They're not like us. They single quotes, different. They don't care about the lives they take. They see themselves as superior, as rulers of everything they control. And when I defected, when I tried to leave them, they marked me, and now they won't stop hunting me." Ethan tried to wrap his mind around what she was saying. The Huun weren't human. That much was clear. But the way she spoke about them made them sound even worse, like they were a force of nature, unstoppable and ruthless. "They're from your world?" Ethan asked cautiously, his voice still filled with disbelief. "How do you know about them?" The woman's eyes hardened, and Ethan could see a flicker of pain in her gaze. "I've seen them. I've been one of them. I was trained to hunt, to kill, but I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't be part of something that destroys innocent lives." She paused, as if the memory was a wound she wasn't ready to reopen. "I thought I could escape them, that I could get away. But they have technology that's far beyond anything Earth has. They can track us. They can find us no matter where we go." Ethan's mind was reeling. He couldn't fully understand the weight of what she was saying, but it was clear that the Huun were far more dangerous than anything he could imagine, and the fact that she had been part of their military, trained to hunt and kill, he couldn't even begin to comprehend what that must have done to her. He didn't know what to say to that. He wasn't a soldier, wasn't trained to understand the kind of trauma she must have gone through. All he could do was listen. He could tell she wasn't finished, that there was more she needed to say. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible now. "I never wanted to drag anyone into this, especially you." Ethan felt a pang of sympathy. She had been running for so long, carrying the weight of her past with her, afraid that anyone she trusted would be hurt because of her. But he had already decided he wasn't going to abandon her. She was his responsibility now. He couldn't turn his back on someone who was this scared, this desperate. "You didn't drag me into anything," he said quietly, his words firm. "You don't have to apologize. You didn't do anything wrong." The woman looked at him, her violet eyes searching his face. Ethan could see the rawness in her expression, the deep-seated fear that had taken hold of her. It was a fear he couldn't fully understand, but he could see it clear as day. "I never thought I could trust anyone again," she said, almost to herself. "But you, ... you've helped me. Even though you don't know me, even though you don't understand any of this, you're still here. You're still helping me." Ethan gave a small, tight smile. "You don't have to trust me all at once. We'll take this one step at a time." For a moment, there was a quiet understanding between them. The weight of the situation hung in the air, but it wasn't as suffocating as it had been before. In this small, dark cave, amidst the fear and uncertainty, they had started to build something new, a bond. The woman didn't speak right away. She seemed to be considering his words. After a long pause, she gave a small nod. "I don't know what's going to happen next," she said, her voice steady now. "But I know that I can't keep running. I have to face this. I have to face them." Ethan looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "We'll face them together." She studied him for a long moment, and Ethan could see something shift in her eyes. It was a flicker of hope, small but there. She was starting to believe again, and for the first time, Ethan truly believed they might have a chance. Facing the enemy, the night passed slowly, each moment stretching out like an eternity. The sounds of the forest around them seemed louder than ever, and every crackling leaf or distant howl of an animal felt like an omen. Ethan couldn't sleep. His mind raced, replaying everything the woman had told him about the Huun, about the things she had done, and the unrelenting pursuit they now faced. He couldn't stop thinking about what was coming, about what they were about to face. By the time the first rays of light began to filter into the cave, Ethan was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the cold ground, trying to keep his mind focused. The woman was sitting across from him, her eyes closed, her face still wary but determined. The trust they had begun to build last night had only deepened. She had revealed the truth, and now they had to face the consequences together. "We can't hide here forever," Ethan said quietly, breaking the silence that had settled between them. "They'll keep looking for you, and if they find us here, we're as good as dead." The woman nodded, her expression hardening. "I know, but I've been running for so long. I don't know where else to go." Ethan glanced toward the cave. Entrance, the sunlight just beginning to touch the edges of the trees outside. He didn't have all the answers, and he wasn't sure how they were going to make it out of this. But one thing was certain, they couldn't stay here forever. The Huun would eventually find them. We need to move. We need to make a stand, he said, his voice filled with resolve. We're not going to outrun them, but maybe we can stop them. The woman looked at him, her violet eyes narrowing as if weighing his words. For a moment, she said nothing, but then, in a voice that was almost a whisper, she spoke. Are you sure? The Huun are relentless. You can't fight them with weapons. They'll destroy you. Ethan clenched his jaw. He knew she was right, but there had to be a way. He couldn't just run. He couldn't let her keep hiding, running from her past. It wasn't just her life at stake anymore. He was in this with her. I'm not talking about fighting them head on, he said slowly, but we can use the terrain. We know this forest. We can set traps, use the environment to our advantage. We don't have to be stronger. We just have to be smarter. She studied him for a long time, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. Ethan could see that she was afraid, but there was something else there too. Hope, perhaps. A flicker of belief that maybe, just maybe, they could survive this. Finally, she nodded. All right, but we need a plan. We can't just throw ourselves into this blindly. Ethan stood up, his mind already racing. He scanned the cave's entrance once again. There was a narrow passage leading out to the back of the mountain, a path that would lead them toward a series of caves hidden deeper in the woods. It was their only way out if they could make it past the Huun. I'll set up a perimeter around the caves. You'll be the one to create the distraction, Ethan said, his voice firm. She gave him a sharp look. A distraction, you think? That will work. Trust me, he said, meeting her gaze. They're here to capture you, not kill you at least. Not immediately. If we can confuse them, give them a reason to think you're somewhere else, we can buy some time. Time to figure out what to do next. The woman didn't speak for a moment. She seemed to be considering his plan, her mind calculating all the possible outcomes. Ethan knew she didn't trust easily, especially not after everything she had been through. But there was something about the way she looked at him now. Something that told him she was willing to give this a chance. All right, she said, her voice steady. But we need to make sure they don't trap us. The Huun are clever. They won't just walk into a trap without checking it first. Ethan nodded. We'll make sure it's foolproof. We can't afford to make any mistakes. They spent the next few hours preparing. Ethan used whatever materials he could find. In the cave and around the area twined branches, sharp rocks to set up a series of makeshift traps around the entrance. His hands moved quickly, the urgency of the situation pushing him to work faster, more efficiently. The woman, in turn, gathered stones and branches, using her alien strength to help him with the heavier materials. Though she didn't speak much, Ethan could see the determination in her eyes, a shared understanding that this was their only chance. As they finished setting up the perimeter, the woman took a deep breath. It's time, Ethan looked at her. You're sure about this? She met his gaze, her violet eyes calm but resolute. We have no choice. They moved into position. Ethan took his place at the far side of the cave, hidden behind a large boulder, while the woman crept toward the narrow passage leading out. She glanced back at him one last time, her eyes filled with a silent promise. Stay safe, she whispered before disappearing into the shadows. Ethan's heart raced as he waited. Every minute felt like an hour. The sounds of the forest outside grew louder, the wind whistling through the trees, but all he could focus on was the woman. He had to trust her. He had to believe that this plan would work. And then he heard the sound of footsteps approaching. The Huun were coming. Ethan held his breath, his fingers gripping the edge of his hiding spot. The woman had done her part. Now it was his turn. A new beginning. The air outside the cave was thick with anticipation. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he crouched behind the large boulder, his eyes fixed on the narrow passage. The sounds of the forest had grown quieter, replaced by the growing presence of the Huun. He could hear their footsteps, their low murmurs as they neared. His mind raced, but he kept his body as still as possible, the tension in the air making it feel like time was standing still. The woman had done her part. She had created the perfect distraction, leading the Huun to believe she had gone down a different path. Now it was Ethan's turn to hold his ground, to ensure that the traps they had set around the entrance would slow the enemy down long enough for them to escape. His fingers tightened around the rock, his grip tightening with each passing second. The sound of boots crunching on the dry forest floor grew louder. The Huun were close. Suddenly, he heard a snap. One of the traps had been triggered. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He didn't know how many of them were coming, but he knew they had to be swift. He had to act now. As the first Huun soldier emerged into view, Ethan sprang from his hiding place. The trap had slowed him down, but there were still more of them. Ethan's heart raced as he sprinted toward the entrance of the cave, taking advantage of the chaos. He moved quickly, making himself as small as possible, blending into the shadows as best as he could. The Huun soldiers were still searching, their eyes scanning every inch of the cave, but they were distracted, unsure of which direction to go. The woman had bought them valuable time, and now it was up to Ethan to finish what they had started. He glanced over his shoulder, his eyes scanning for any sign of the woman. He could hear her breathing, her footsteps faint but determined. She was still alive, still fighting. Suddenly, he heard a shout, and then the unmistakable sound of gunfire. Ethan's heart dropped. He didn't know if the woman was injured, but he couldn't waste any more time. He had to move fast. With a burst of energy, he ran towards the sounds of the gunfire, weaving through the trees. The dense forest was now their battleground, and Ethan could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The Huun were relentless, but so were they. They wouldn't let fear stop them. He found her a few hundred yards ahead, crouching behind a large rock. She was breathing heavily, her body tense with readiness. Her violet eyes met his as he approached. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice steady despite the fear she must have been feeling. "But we can't run forever." Ethan nodded. "We don't have to. We'll fight. We'll make them realize that they can't win." The woman studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Then, with a slight nod, she rose to her feet. "All right, let's make this count." Together, they stood side by side, ready for whatever the Huun threw at them. They didn't have much, but they had the element of surprise. The Huun might have the numbers, the technology, and the firepower, but Ethan and the woman had each other. And in that moment, it felt like that was all they needed. The Huun emerged from the trees, their eyes scanning for any sign of movement. They had no idea that they were about to be caught in a trap of their own. Ethan and the woman moved quickly, using the environment to their advantage. They set up traps, hid in the shadows, and used the dense forest to outmaneuver the Huun. Enemy soldiers fell one by one, their surprise giving Ethan and the woman the upper hand. As the last of the Huun soldiers fell to the ground, their bodies lying still among the trees, the woman let out a long, relieved breath. "It's over," she said, her voice filled with both exhaustion and relief. Ethan nodded, his heart still racing. They had won, but he knew the battle wasn't truly over. The Huun would never give up. But for now, they had succeeded. They had made it through. For the first time, Ethan turned his eyes to the woman beside him. She had been a stranger, a scared fugitive, when she first appeared in his cabin. But now, she was his ally, his friend, Dan together. They had fought against a force far greater than either of them could have imagined. "I don't know where we go from here," Ethan said quietly, his voice filled with uncertainty. The woman looked at him, her face softening. "We go forward," she said, her eyes reflecting a new strength. "We go to a place where we can start again, a place where we can be free." Ethan smiled, the weight of the moment sinking in. They had won. They had survived, and now they had the chance to rebuild together. They walked away from the forest, the first rays of the morning sun breaking through the trees. The world was still full of danger, but it was also full of possibility, and for the first time, they both knew they were no longer alone. They were no longer running. They were starting a new life together.